For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Hi, I'm Surya Gangadharan and we are looking at the Bangladesh Liberation War 50 years ago. With me, my editor-in-chief, Nitin Gokhale.
Hi,
Now,
Surya.
Nitin, the one point that struck me when we were discussing this earlier today is that you and I may know a lot about the war because we were probably in school at the time and we've read a lot of literature on that. Young people today, since I understand they don't read very much, in that sense, a show like this has, I think, some merit.
Oh, indeed. In fact, 50 years ago would mean, two generations ago, people who were young would know about it, but certainly not those born in the 90s, 80s, and the 90s would have no idea about what happened in 1971 or even before that. So I think this show does merit attention, although the war against Pakistan was formally launched on 3rd of December, as you will recall. But the run-up itself was very interesting, isn't it, Surya?
Yeah. Mm. History, great history.
Oh, it
The
is. It's a
refugees and
sub-continental history. This is Yahya Khan. You can see meeting Pakistani army officers. There is also, I think, the huge support for the Bangladesh Awami League Party that time, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and then subsequently the exodus from East Pakistan coming into India. Close to 10 million refugees came into India. You remember, we've read
yeah,
and then we've heard from other people. And
yeah.
of course, then the war happened in December. It was also the biggest surrender post 1945 after the Second World War. This is the surrender document being signed by Lieutenant General A.K. Niazi on the right. And of course, the Pakistanis had to really eat crow in East Pakistan. But and
Iconic
these are
pictures, Nitin. Iconic pictures.
iconic
I mean,
pictures, and these are the pictures I had shot in the Genocide Museum or the Independence Museum in Dhaka in April when I'd gone there this year. These are pictures from those iconic times, protests, civil disobedience, the Mukti Bahini, which was, and of course, misery and
yeah,
atrocity.
tragedy.
Tragedy, misery, atrocities, genocide carried out by the Pakistani army against the helpless civilians in East Pakistan. I think that is unparalleled. And this, again, an iconic picture Pakistani soldiers surrendering. 93,000 of them subsequently surrendered on 16th December, as you can see here in these pictures. These are all pictures shot on the wall of that museum in Dhaka. And of course, these are horrific pictures. On the first day of the crackdown under Operation Searchlight on 25th
Yeah.
March 1971, 30,000 people were butchered by the Pakistani army and all helpless civilians. It started off, many of us will recall, in the Dhaka University, where the
Yeah.
intellectuals were picked as a
Yeah.
target and then completely mercilessly massacred. But
Mhm.
there was much more to it from much before the year of 1971. Of course, you will recall that Pakistan, despite its two wings having got independence or become independent country in 1947, never really had anything in common with each other, East and West Pakistan.
Mhm. So, Nitin, since we're talking about the politics here, and
Yeah,
it was all orchestrated by an army general, Yahya Khan, you know.
that's
So,
right.
what is it that makes an otherwise well-trained soldier, this guy is educated, do the kind of things that he goes and does, genocide without a second thought?
Well,
What is it?
yeah, actually, Yahya Khan that time was the chief martial law administrator in Pakistan. He also had one more run-in with India in 1965. In fact, but for his folly, I'm just taking you back 6 years before 1971. But for his folly of delaying the offensive against India in the Akhnur sector, this is Yahya Khan on the right, the portly man that he was. He
Yeah.
was debauched. He was completely merciless and not. He was unlike an army officer actually. But he got kept getting promoted. In 1965, he delayed the offensive against India, saving or allowing India to regain ground and then halt the Pakistani advance in the Akhnur sector. So, not a great tactician or a strategist as far as a military career went, but he was
Hmm.
a politician in the garb of an army man. So I mean, if you look at it, in 1970 general elections in Pakistan, Awami League had won the majority hands down. And according to their own constitution, he should have become Sheikh Mujibur Rahman should have
Yeah.
become the prime minister of undivided Pakistan. But Yahya Khan and Bhutto conspired to deny Awami League. That's Sheikh Mujib's iconic, I think, 7th March 1971 huge meeting rally in Dhaka, which almost proclaimed independence from West Pakistan. This is the
Yeah.
museum that I was talking about, where history is recorded in terms of photographs and documents, and some of the horrific pictures are also there. But that is how it was. But coming back to the politics, and this was West and East Pakistan, I think the two could never meet heart to heart. Really, you will recall
Hmm.
Surya. These two were as different as chalk and cheese. These two wings
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
Pakistan. Hmm.
And even today, Nitin, if you look at the contempt that underlines the average Pakistani's attitude towards Bangladesh, it's still there. Although they know that the Bangladesh has gone far ahead in terms of social indices and economic development and so on, but that dislike and that I don't know where this comes from.
In fact, I'm wondering that what was going around in Jinnah's mind, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's mind, when he wanted these two things to happen, because the two wings to become parts of Pakistan. Because today, Bangladesh, in fact, there's a good news for Bangladesh, which was announced by the UN today, that they have no longer, they along with Nepal, Bangladesh along with Nepal is no longer the least developed country. They've been
Yeah, yeah.
upgraded from there. This is Bhutto's, Yahya Khan's caricature in that museum. These are the kind of things that happened. I think, the whole thing is that the Punjabi Pakistanis actually thought that they're superior, and the Bengalis have to be kept under their rule and thumb. But the Bengalis had a fierce independent streak. They loved their culture, they loved their language. And I recall reading that in 1948 itself, within 7 or 8 months, when Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, went to Dhaka, he declared unilaterally that Urdu will be the official language of Pakistan, which
Yeah.
put paid to any sense of unity that the two wings could have had, really. So the seeds of fragmentation of Pakistan were sown by Jinnah himself in 1948.
Yeah. Now, Nitin, you have written about the 71 war, and I mean, written about, you have books, relating to the war. In a crisis, they say all government tends to come together. It requires a crisis really to get the Indian, machine moving, the Indian beast moving. So, was that also the case? I mean, I look at intelligence, the armed forces, the PMO. I mean, uh, did it all kind of come together?
Oh, in 71, yes, certainly. I mean, now if we move from the internal crisis in Pakistan and the subsequent crackdown on March 25th, 71, and subsequently, India was at the receiving end of that huge inflow of refugees, as I mentioned. 10 million refugees coming into India's northeast and West Bengal was a huge burden on a country like India, which was still very
Yeah.
poor, was not able to feed its own population properly, and that became a burden. So initially, and I'm talking from a little bit of research and experience because, as you are aware, I wrote this book on the founder of RNAW, RN Cow,
Yeah.
who played a huge role in 71 as the chief of RNAW, which was just 3 years old that time. And therefore, having researched and read, I'm just speaking from that experience, and of course, speaking to Bangladeshi friends. Uh, that is why one is talking about. So, if we go back to March 1971 or April 1971, the government of India was not sure which way this was going. Mrs.
Yeah.
Gandhi, Indira Gandhi was the prime minister. She had very able advisors in P.N. Haksar and D.P. Dhar, and of course R.N. Kao, who was very close to her as the chief of RNAW. And you had General Sam Manekshaw as as the army chief at that point in time. So she had very able advisors, and she always had this thing to listen. This is my visit to Dhaka, as you can see in the visuals in April. So coming back to your question about the all of government approach to the war and the preparations for war. So initially in March, nobody was ready for a military intervention because India was
Hmm.
not sure which way it was going. And the military had also advised, General Sam Manekshaw had also advised that it's too early to get there because India needs to prepare and to get into another country. And Bangladesh, East Pakistan then, or Bangladesh today, has too many um, rivers and rivulets and streams which will be in spate during the monsoon. And it will be a folly to take the army in that time and get bogged down. So that was
Yeah.
one advice from the military. The second advice was from the or diplomats and her advisors, who said that we still don't know which way the international community was going on this internal crisis in Pakistan. So they wanted to be very cautious and not take a hasty decision. So all told, I think all arms of the government were on one page. They met frequently. They consulted each other, and the 8 9 months from March to November, before the war actually started in December on December 3rd, there was a huge synergy between all arms of the government, political, PMO, the diplomatic corps, military, and intelligence. RNW played a huge part in that's PN Haksar with Mrs. Gandhi. And they worked as a team. This is, of course, the Soviet Union General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party, Leonid Brezhnev. These are alien names, I think, Surya, for the
Yeah.
millennials.
Yeah.
But but we, I mean, all of us who only read books and sort of saw pictures, we can recall all this. But you're right. I mean, the all of government approach really worked in a crisis that time. And
Hmm.
I think this is the picture when Mujib was to be arrested on at the night of 25th March 1971. This is, of course, the iconic surrender picture. But you also will recall that that Sam Manekshaw and Mrs. Gandhi. But the whole issue was that India took its time to decide to intervene militarily, and I think that worked beautifully at the end.
Hmm. Kao has referred to this in the extracts that you sent me. The relative timidity of the Indian generals in the 65 war, and then 5 years later, something completely different. I mean, in 5 years, they learned the lessons or what?
No, so we'll have to again go back to 1962. Actually, from November 1962, when Yashwantrao Chavan became the defense minister and the rebuilding and the reorganization and the revamp of the Indian military began,
Hmm.
in 1965, the Indian military, especially the Indian army, was in the midst of that expansion. Remember,
Okay.
between 1962 and 1965, the strength of the Indian army went up from 300,000 to 800,000, from 3 lakh to 8 lakh. And when this 65 war was imposed on India, it was still in the midst of that expansion and that modernization. But
Hmm.
because they learned, I've said this in my other books of the book on the 1965 war. I've said if the 1965 war had not happened, India would not have had the major military success in 71 because that was like a dress rehearsal. That was like a
Hmm.
semi-final, a penultimate round. So all the mistakes made in 65 were either overcome or avoided by the Indian military, by the Indian intelligence. In fact, intelligence failed in 1965, and therefore the if you go back to the period between 1965 and 1971, uh, the 65 debacle on the intelligence front prompted Mrs. Gandhi to have the formation of RAW hastened.
Mhm.
RNAW as an external intelligence agency till 1965 or till 1967, 68, 68 September 68 was the formation of RAW. The external as well as internal intelligence was handled by the Intelligence Bureau, which was unwieldy. So RAW was formed in 1968. So they started performing from day one. They hit the ground running, and they were ready and with all their inputs and all their assets on the ground in East Pakistan by the time the crackdown started happening there. So that was the advantage for the intelligence. Similar advantage for the Indian military, which had then got sort of seasoned. It had got the modern equipment, had become strengthened between 65 and 1970. So by the time 71 came, Indian military was at its, I would say, peak of its power post 1962, within 9 years of the 1962 military debacle. So that was the background as far as what Rao wrote in the book or the extract that I sent you, where he says that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
timidity or at least the indecisiveness of the Indian generals was no longer visible in 1971.
Mhm. And the persona of Indira Gandhi, would you say she was the hammer behind the?
Oh yes, in fact, there are very very detailed and very well researched books on 1971 by one by Srinath Raghavan, the other recent one on P. N. Aksar by Jairam Ramesh. Similarly, I think diplomat Chandrasekhar Dasgupta has come up with a book. I haven't read that, but there is enough material available, and all of them credit Mrs. Indira Gandhi with what is called the decisiveness as far as the crisis management was concerned. Same cannot be said about her post the victory in the 1971 war, the military victory, because she sort of lost what was gained in war in peace during the
Yeah,
Shimla Accord. And I think her advisors that time, P. N. Aksar, D. P. Dhar, uh, performed brilliantly during the war itself, but maybe fell short during the subsequent peace talks or the talks with Pakistanis, and failed to gain or secure advantage for India in terms of gaining something from Pakistan. I mean, that's the reality, really. So it's a mixed bag as far as Mrs. Gandhi is concerned.
in fact, there's even a question from Ansuvadeep Zanyal on that, why
Yeah.
Kashmir was not resolved, and what actions were taken against General Tikka Khan. You know anything
Yes.
about Tikka Khan? What happened to him?
Well, no, no, we don't know what happened to him. In fact, the Hamidur Rahman report, which the Pakistanis uh, sort of instituted, or the commission of inquiry, it also doesn't say. Actually, they all pinned the blame on finally on Niazi because he lost the war. But
Yeah,
the crackdown and the atrocities were carried out by Tika Khan. You're right, and the viewer is also right, Sodeep Sanyal, that Tika Khan was the butcher of Bangladesh, and it's not
yeah,
only here, there, but also in Balochistan, he had done the similar thing. So the
yeah,
Pakistani generals were actually sadistic, I would think. And at that point, Yahya Khan, Tika Khan, even Niazi of all people, actually wrote in his book, the book he wrote subsequently, that he wasn't provided the wherewithal. He did not have enough support from the military that time. So that's quite surprising given Pakistan's
yeah,
proclivity to have unity in the army at least. But Tika Khan, I really don't know what happened to him because there's no literature readily available in India about Tika Khan, but a lot of literature about Niazi, who was finally the fall guy. And
yeah.
I think what the Pakistani military's mistake was to underestimate the resilience of the Bengali people, the resistance that they put up. Despite so many people being killed and so many people being deprived of their liberties, I think they were fiercely proud of their language and their
Yeah,
culture.
yeah.
and they just wanted to be independent of the Pakistanis in that sense, or the West Pakistanis, the Punjabi dominance that was there in the undivided Pakistan.
Yeah. Nitin, we have a complaint from one of our viewers, Ma Tara, that she say
Uh-huh.
that this discussion is happening between two non-Bengalis, who don't have any skin in the game.
Well, it can be said to our credit that we can get Bengalis, but then, given the proclivity and the sentimental attachment that the Bengalis may have with the Bengali struggle in 71, the discussion would
Yeah.
never end. At least two of us, one South Indian, one Marathi, will end that discussion. But I am a honorary Northeasterner, having spent 23 years, lived there and reported from there and reported from Bangladesh as early as 1986 and read up on that. I can claim that I know a bit of Bangladesh history and
And your wife knows Bengali.
and I know Bengali. I can understand Bengali. I can speak Bengali. So that way, Matara, I think uh, I mean we are qualified, at least half qualified to do this discussion, if nothing else.
Okay, let me get on to another question about integration is the big buzzword these days. At that time, how did it work? The Army, Navy, Air Force pulling in different directions, yet being driven by a common. And how did it
Objective.
work, really?
Yeah, no. So, well, there were problems between, say, the Air Force and the Army, certainly, as they continue to be. But I think the leadership that time in the military, Air Chief Marshal P.C. Lal, General Sam Manekshaw, and Admiral S.M. Nanda, were bigger men in terms of large-heartedness and otherwise. And they also knew that they had to get um they had to get the end objective achieved, which was given to them. I think they were, despite their personal differences, some literature has alluded that they were not on talking terms, Air Chief Marshal P.C. Lal and General Sam Manekshaw. But I haven't found too much evidence of that in any of the literature or writing. But
Hmm.
notwithstanding all that, I think there is the proof of the pudding is always in eating. Remember, post the Second World War, the biggest airborne operation, the airlift, was done by the Indian Air Force to get one full para battalion, the second para, the two para
Tangier.
battalion across the Meghna and drop them at Tangail, which was a beautifully executed, synergized operation between the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army. Similarly, the Navy played a huge part. They blockaded Karachi, main harbor for Pakistan, and also blockaded Chittagong on the east, and of course sunk the PNS Ghazi as it tried to come close to INS Vikrant, the old INS Vikrant near Vishakhapatnam. So I think all of them were raring to go. All three contributed equally, and more than anything else, I think RN Kao, as the chief of RNAW, kept the coordination going between the civilian arm of the government and the military. His and his team's contribution can never be underestimated or underplayed, because they provided the best intelligence possible at that point in time, also trained along with the Indian Army, the Mukti Bahini. So SFF, the Special Frontier Force, that time its chief SS Oban, actually trained the Mukti Bahini or the Bengalis into a Mukti Bahini force, and which contributed immensely to the subsequent quick success in East Pakistan campaign. So therefore, this is the naval component. The INS Vikrant also blockaded Chittagong. There were the sabotage operations inside East Pakistan. Everything worked beautifully. I think it's one of those rare, those three chiefs with President VV Giri that time you just saw.
Yeah.
It is a rare success and integration. I suppose we have to go back to 71 to talk about what the three services can achieve together, to really
Mhm.
see how they work together if they put their minds to it.
Mhm. But Nitin, is there a institutional memory that so many different arms of government got together, civil, military, does that
I don't think that has been preserved or the people remember that much. I keep talking about it wherever one goes. I'm sure there are others who have noticed it. In fact, there is one more aspect of that campaign which goes unnoticed or not sort of talked about much is the planned way in which India managed perceptions across the globe.
yeah.
Not only did the diplomats go around, Mrs. Gandhi herself went around and sent her emissaries across big capitals of the world that time to tell them what was happening in East Pakistan and how India was suffering because of the huge flow of the refugees. But India also made sure that the world press, the dominant world media, actually went into East Pakistan in the months between April and November 1971, before the war began, and bring out stories about Pakistani army's atrocities. So by the time the war started, there was already a revulsion against the Pakistani army across the world, and nobody questioned India's joining the war. And remember, the war was launched by Pakistan and not by India
Yeah,
on
yeah,
7th
yeah,
December. So I think
yeah,
that's a classic example of how all arms of the government and well thought out strategies were there. BSF
yeah.
contributed hugely in the 71 operations, which is again not sort of talked about much. That must be done. Now, there were so many heroes of that campaign. There was Sam Manekshaw, the three chiefs, of course, RN Kao, DP Dhar, PN Aksar, Mrs. Gandhi. Swaran Singh, who was the External Affairs Minister, also went round. And we can't forget the role the Soviet Union played at that point in time.
What about General Jacob, JFR Jacob?
Well, General Jacob was the chief of staff in Eastern Command. He had a boss in Eastern Command called Lieutenant Jagjit Singh Arora. So
Yeah,
General Jacob, I think, has been he's standing behind General Niazi. If you see the man with his left
yeah,
hand
yeah. Mm.
there, uh, while General Jacob did play a great role in coordinating the operations from the Fort Williams, which is the Eastern Command headquarters. I think the claims or some of the writings that claim, or he himself claiming that he persuaded or forced Niazi to surrender, are slightly exaggerated, because chiefs of staff in the military hierarchy play no operational role. And
Mhm.
I may be sounding controversial, but that's the reality. The operational decisions in commands are taken by the army commanders, and in this case, it would have been Jagjit Singh Arora, who didn't see eye to eye with Jacob, I suppose. Jacob was sent to, of course, deliver that letter for asking Niazi to surrender on 16 December
Yeah.
1971. But the undue exaggeration of importance to Jacob should not be projected too much, because that was not the reality. Subsequently, a lot of people have claimed that he played a big role. Certainly, he played a big role, like all other army officers,
So many
all
others.
other.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the architect of the surrender, as some quarters have made out to be.
Mhm. So, Nitin, we are nearly the end of our time. What's that one big takeaway from 71? I mean, leaving aside all the pride and all that stuff, what's that
So
one big takeaway?
one big takeaway is that when people decide to revolt, no army, no force can stop the force of the people, or the energy of the people. And it is also the only example, perhaps post the Second World War, where a military intervention for sort of preceded by a political, diplomatic, strategic offensive in the non-military domain, actually changed the geography of the Indian subcontinent. Cannot be denied, and that's a big takeaway. India helped the Bengalis create their own nation. Their contribution should also be acknowledged. It's not just the Indian army or the Indian military that fought there; it was the Mukti Bahini also. But the fact is that the geography of the subcontinent changed, and this is the reality. That's the big takeaway. That when people decide to revolt and then take all the pain and all the atrocities in their stride, when they are passionate about their own culture, their language, their
Yeah.
traditions, and no force can stop them. That's the big takeaway.
Yeah. So I think we are at the end of our time. Nitin, good history. It's great to look back
Yes,
on 71,
yes,
and I'm
yeah.
glad we decided at the last minute to do this.
Couldn't
And
get
I'm
the Bengali
grateful for
flow.
all the comments from our viewers and readers. Glad to have you, and thanks again for coming on the gist with your comments and observations. Subscribe to our channel and keep come to us with your questions and your comments. Always welcome. Subscribe to us. Thank you. Good night.